All right, welcome everyone. This is Johnny at the Authors Guild Foundation. We're here for our Agent Talks series with Paloma Hernando, and moderating today is Tamara Kawar. We're talking about the graphic novel pitch, the graphic novel proposal for an author illustrator or an author illustrator team, and we're going to be learning a lot. Thanks to the National Endowment for the Arts and our sponsors, the Authors Guild Foundation is able to make educational programming like this free and open to the public. The foundation is the charitable arm of the Authors Guild, a membership association. Besides the foundation's programming, the Guild offers member services like legal advice, including reviewing publishing contracts and things like that. We build websites for authors, insurance programs, all sorts of professional things like that. Let's see here. So our presenter today is Paloma Hernando, and our moderator is Tamara Kawar, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tamara, who's going to talk to us about literary agents of change. Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm very excited to be here for this panel on creating the perfect graphic novel pitch. We're very excited to be continuing our partnership with the Authors Guild for this Agent Talk series. Just a little bit about Literary Agents of Change. We're a nonprofit that was born out of the Association of American Literary Agents, the ALA, and our goal is for the retention and promotion and access to the career of the profession of literary agents to members of historically underrepresented groups. I'm co-director of our mentorship program, which focuses on the retention and promotion of early career literary agents. Paloma Hernando is one of our incredibly talented members of this year's mentorship cohort. So a bit about me, I'm a literary agent at DeFiore Company. I also specialize in graphic novels. I'll be in the Q&A helping to answer any questions that may come up. Kicking it off is Paloma.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm really excited to dive into this topic together. Thanks, Tamara and Johnny, for those great intros. I'll try to live up to it. It's really exciting that this is kind of one of the first, I think, like official talks about graphic novels because something that a lot of you guys may be aware of or maybe not aware of is that it's kind of one of the youngest genres right now in just publishing in general. The history of it really you could even say that it's less than 20 years old or less than 25 years old at this point. Um and because of that, there's a lot of trial and error that's been happening. But I feel like we as an industry are really starting to land on what works, what's the best way for you guys as creators to present your work to us, and how we can then make an incredible book happen, which is what everybody really wants to achieve. So I wanted to walk you guys through what I think really goes into rock solid graphic novel pitch. Um, this is going to be really focused on the pitch that you send to the agent. There's two times that you're going to pitch a graphic novel. One time is going to be to the agent, and then the second time is when you and the agent are working on it together to pitch to an editor. So, it's going to transform. It's going to, the same amount that any query is going to transform. And what's great is that I can kind of look at it from the perspective as someone who is I receive a lot of graphic novel pitches. The majority of my list is graphic novelists. And then also, the I've like worked on pitches together. So I understand like the parts that are maybe like more nerve-wracking or more frustrating, or you're really trying to make a decision and you don't know how much is weighing on that decision. It can be a little high pressure. So I like to kind of go into a little bit the logic behind how you make the pitch. So I can just go ahead and dive in. Um, there we go. So I think the step zero really is finding the right idea to pick. I know a lot of people that are probably here today You guys might be a total beginner to graphic novels. You might be someone who's, has a lot of passion in, like, you love to read them, so you really want to find out like what goes on behind. And I know also uh, I'm going to be talking to a varied audience here, that some of you guys might be writers interested in finding an illustrator. Some of you guys might be interested in drawing it yourselves. Or also sometimes there's artists who are like, I have an idea, but I need a writer to really like help me with this. So the language I use, it might fluctuate who I'm talking to, but hopefully just, pick up the things that you hear are relevant to your situation. But if you're the person coming up with the main idea of the graphic novel, there's some great things that you can kind of, some stress tests you can put your idea through before deciding to commit to making a whole pitch packet about it. One of the top things that I think people don't realize is as important as it is that your story is the right size. For mainstream graphic novel pitching, you really want to pitch a graphic novel. Sometimes you might be able to pitch like a duology or a trilogy, but honestly, I would say, especially for a debut book, it's really, really good to try to keep it to like one book of 200 to 400 pages. Something that's, an editor's not going to look at this and disqualify it on format alone. Um, but a thing that is really important to kind of understand, as especially if you come from prose writing, is that you have a lot less room than you do have in a book. Even though it's just as many pages and the tempo might be just as fast as any other kind of book, because of the space per page, a lot less happens in a page of a graphic novel than a page of a prose book. So you really want your story to be concise, you want it to be direct, and you want to be really confident in its structure. Just because you're going to have to play with a lot of different elements. A thing that I really like doing is that I really like comping the structure to movies. I found it's way easier than trying to comp it to another prose book, or a TV show, or anything else. Like, a movie has like a really set beginning, middle, and end. And also, like, if you think about it, usually it takes most people around 2 hours to read a graphic novel. So you're kind of leading them through the same experience. The second thing that I think is really important is making sure that your graphic novel looks interesting. This sounds kind of glib, but like, it's kind of this idea of always thinking of the most visually interesting way to tell your story. Because, you're drawing, or someone is drawing the whole thing. You should have it look really cool. And the visual identity of the book is kind of its biggest stamp. Um, so, you want to make sure that you're really making an impact whenever you can. Um, the When I say feels relevant, something to be aware of is how competitive graphic novels are, and that you really are going to want yours to stand out. So you're going to want to have comps, but you also want to make sure that it's not, exactly copying something else. You have a kind of tighter margin than you would have in other genres, like something like teen prose fiction, where there's way more editors, way more imprints that are looking for that than people that are looking for graphic novels. And then the last thing is to be really aware of how much work goes into a graphic novel, and also make sure that you're always playing to your strengths, to your artist's strengths. That's something that we're going to kind of get into later, is, not all drawings are made the same. Not all artists specify, like, kind of, if an artist is good at everything, they're probably, they're probably more of a jack of all trades than a master of one. And you want to have that balance where you're not putting someone or yourself out of your comfort zone too much by forcing someone to get good at drawing something they maybe don't even care to draw too much. Yeah. All right, and so this is just for the folks in at I hear who are a writer who are maybe coming to the world of illustrators and to the world of art as kind of a newcomer, and you're like, I really want to make sure I can make this happen without you know, doing a social faux pas, or even just like professionally taking like the wrong technique or something like that. So I would say, as a writer, especially if you want to really bolster someone's confidence in working with you, I would say don't have what you're pitching be your very first comic that you do. Have experience. There's some really great opportunities in, they're not really paid that well or at all sometimes. But it's, there's always a million like anthology projects that are happening. There might be a local comic show that you could maybe produce, like a zine, which is like a offhand for kind of a handmade, self-printed comic. There's small publishers. Sometimes there's just like an opportunity to like make a web comic and kind of find other opportunities to collaborate with artists that way, because it's just like way lower kind of stakes than being like, hey, do you want to work on a 5 year long project that is going to hopefully shape both of our careers. um I think also another great thing is to reach out to someone who's kind of at the same professional level as you. If someone's much further along and they're already making books and they're already working with folks, it could be that, either they're going to be, their time is very valuable and you might have to like pay a lot more to work with them, or it's just like not going to be a great matchup. I think it's really important, if you are someone who's learning, to get someone who's willing to learn with you, that you're both kind of like on a journey together. It just makes it more balanced in general. And then on the other side, make sure it's someone who wants to make that commitment um, into the professional world. There's a lot of people who post on online who, for them, it's more of a hobby. It's more of something that they do around their day job or other things in their life. And you want to make sure that, who you decide to go through making this project together, that you guys are both at the same level of commitment. Um, as the person approaching the artist, unless you guys are already like really good friends, or you're both like equally invested in this creative project, I would say it's usually pretty standard to offer to compensate them. Art takes a lot of energy. It's hard to do that on spec. If you really want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, sometimes what you can offer is that you can offer to pay them up front, and then that money later is when you guys get your eventual advance, kind of like that money goes back into your pocket, as like kind of a way to even that out. So that way you're not like completely an extra like thousand out. So there's definitely ways to negotiate it. I would also really suggest with this, like making a collaboration agreement the second that, agent representation comes into play, or the second that you guys are really planning on like pitching a book that you want to sell for money. A collaboration agreement is really great for getting you both on the same page, setting up all the standards. It doesn't have to be like confrontational at all. If anything, it usually helps. This is my agent side speaking, but like usually it's better to talk about these things than have them surprise you way later down the line. Another thing that this is kind of a personal soapbox of mine. I think I have worked in comics, and I've worked as both a writer and an artist. You work a lot more on the project as an artist. It is much harder on your body. It's many more hours that you have to dedicate to it. You can't do this plus, like, there's not really a world where you can like be drawing full time and also have a day job, like, unless you're really, really fast at drawing, like, so I would say, be very open to taking a different split, maybe something that's 60/40 or 70/30, depending on the project. Just because that's just, I think it's a good standard, and it makes it more sustainable for that artist to be able to keep making projects with you or with other people. And also, like, when you're bringing in a collaborator, make sure that they're just as invested, in improving the story as you are, like that it's something they're passionate about. Um, and this is something for them to kind of decide too. Like like I said, it's a 5-year project. It's not something that you can kind of do casually. So this is Heka for writers, and I just wanted to take a little bit time. This is another one I'll kind of try to go through a little bit quickly, so that way we can get to it, because honestly, this page could be an entire not just an entire college course. Like this is what some people go to college for 4 years to study, is the standards of what is good comics. I don't have to run through all of these, but this is really great for when you're assessing someone else's art, of kind of you know, thinking about it. And also when you're writing, or if you're writing for the expectation of drawing it later, that you're kind of like building into the process. So, like something that a writer is usually really responsible for is how much dialogue is in the comic panels, or like if you're writing a really detailed script saying what's going on inside of a panel. And so, for example, a great tell of someone who I realize is not very experienced in doing comics is like I've gotten before some scripts where like someone will sneeze and say something inside of one panel. And it's like, oh, that's not one panel, that's 2 panels. So kind of being able to be aware of that type of stuff. A really great resource, I kind of pulled it out from my bookshelf, is this is like an old, ooh, it's un here. Oh, there we go. Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. Have it on your bookshelf if you're even thinking about working with comics. Read it through. It's kind of dated, but it's honestly the best so far. So it's it's kind of just the best way to learn from the beginning all the way to kind of like the master techniques. All right, so now we're going to kind of go into the different parts of the pitch. And I really wanted to, you know, take some time to kind of explain the different elements that go into the pitch. This isn't exactly how you're going to want to arrange them. I just kind of wanted to uh, group them by type rather than put them in order. I can explain at the end kind of my methodology for like how to order a pitch. But this is great because it's kind of the different sections that you should be focusing on and kind of what they are conveying. So when you're talking about a pitch, you're really talking about communicating the potential of the story that you're making. When, graphic novels are really specific in that they're one of the only genres that only kind of gets sold and bought based on pitch alone. We don't make that much of the kind of actual content before it goes to the editor. We kind of make it like beginning to end after the deal is already struck. And so what you're really doing now is that you're really just trying to sell us on your concept and kind of everything that's in your brain that you imagine this project being. Um, and that's kind of hard to do because you kind of have to be a salesperson for this project that doesn't exist yet. There's other and kind of this is all different elements that are going to help you give the agent all of the information that they need to picture this book, to imagine it, to be like, okay, I see what this is going to look like. I know what this rhythm is going to kind of be, and I can fill in all the gaps that this pitch has given me. So the first thing, which is for this is kind of more the writer's responsibility, is to have these 3 different ways of summarizing the story. The first one is the log line, also sometimes called the elevator pitch. It's, really condensing your story to a very small, short summary, which, you don't need to describe everything that's going on, but it's a really great test to see like, okay, can I summarize the story in 2 to 4 sentences? Because if I can't, maybe the story's too complicated. Maybe it's not, going back to what's the good idea. It's like maybe I need to flip up that idea and really, really refocus on what this story's about. The synopsis, you have some more room. This is really a way to give, um, what I think is the most important in the synopsis is showing the beginning, the middle, and the end. That's super important for me as an agent. I want to be able to see like the clear line that this book is going to have. I want to like carry it all the way to the end. And then you have the outline, which is much more room. You can go more into detail. You can talk about character interactions. I wouldn't say go so much into detail that you're saying like every single thing that people are saying, every single detail of the scenes. Um, but you can definitely kind of go more into like, chapter by chapter or scene by scene of kind of what's happening. Um, where that's really good because you can kind of get a little bit meta with it. I really like to take time in my outline to, tell the editor what's going on, not just physically on the page, but also like emotionally, because that's going to be something that you can't really communicate until you see the art, until you hear the dialogue. So kind of being like, at this point, this is really tragic because we know that her sister's not dead, but she thinks that her sister is dead. So kind of like saying that, just outright saying it is, I've found a lot more helpful because, I don't, I'm okay if you spoil something for me. Um, and it also really helps communicate the pacing, both emotional and action. So, when you're writing your outline, you want to kind of have some craft to go into it to kind of reflect what you want the eventual book to feel like. The second part that's really, really important for an editor and an agent to know about when looking at your pitches is who's the cast of characters. Um, the first of this is art, the second is writing, but the character portraits are really, really important. One of the biggest things in narrative design is character design. It is really important to see how they look like next to each other. It's one of like the skills that a graphic novelist needs to have. We, especially for the main cast, you really want to have like head to toe illustrations of them wearing, make sure it's like an outfit that's pretty iconic for them. Make sure that they're styled like in a way that shows like their um kind of their attitude and their character within them. If they have like, if they're always carrying around a sketchbook or something like that, like have that. And also I would say as a more technical note, have it finished to the point that a that a the book will be finished, so that way we see them with, like, all of their colors, the final line art, all of that. I would say, like, kind of a good rule of thumb is full body portraits for anybody that has an arc, and then it can be more casual, black and white, like, sketchy portraits or even just like a headshot of anybody who's named in the outline. Like if someone is named and they come up like a few times, I want to know what they look like. I want to know kind of what dynamic they're bringing. Um, for the written bios underneath them, they're each, they each should be like maybe just like a paragraph or so, unless there's one that's like super, you're like, no, I need to really go into detail about her whole deal. Um, I think, you want to give all the basic info, even if it's stuff that's not expressly kind of obvious in the outline. And I kind of stole this from animation pitches. What they'll do is that they'll just like outright say what a character's arc is, especially for stuff made for children, or just like, YA is also like it's anybody who is gonna have this kind of like arc that's important to the story. It's really great to just come out right and say it. Because like I said, you don't want to withhold any of this information. And then this is a part that I'm just kind of calling aesthetics. As you can tell, this is very much the art focused part of it. You are going to want to have test pages. A lot of people say that 10, like sometimes 10 is the minimum. So like you might end up wanting to just commit to 10. Personally, I think if it's just like a scene that's very striking and illustrative, like I can kind of get the same amount from 4 pages. And I don't, it might end up being 10 when you pitch it to the editor, but if it's like 4 finished pages and then some other sketch pages, like that's totally okay. Um, I really think that, the pages that you pick, they don't have to be the very first parts. It's not like first 10 pages of a query, but it should be something that's like, the you should show off like a a part near the beginning that's maybe it's like when two main characters meet, or it's when like the first reveal happens, or when if there's magic, it's like the first time you really kind of reveal whatever magic happens in the story. That you want to show off your main character, and most importantly kind of like your character acting. Like you just want to think of like what's a really good preview for this book, so you can be kind of strategic with what scene you choose to write for that. Honestly, something that I give to a lot of people, because a lot of times when you're coming up with a pitch, I found that there's sometimes like scenes that will motivate you to write the story. You'll be like, oh, I would love to see like an interaction like this between two characters. And if that scene kind of happens close to the beginning, I would say like put that in. Put the scene that like started your idea of this story, because if it got you excited about the story, it's going to get us excited about the story. And then I kind of have this as concept sketches, which this is like extra art that either you can intentionally make, or sometimes like they just kind of come around when you're like brainstorming things and workshopping things. Like I really want to see if it's something that you want the final book to look like. I want to see it as an agent. Like I am okay if you collect a bunch of stuff that might not seem super relevant, but it is important to your impression of the book. I've had people submit to me like meme redraws, and like sometimes if you have like goofy short form comics of just them like talking to each other, even though it's like this isn't going to show up in the book, but this helped me figure out the characters, and it's going to help your, whoever's looking at this pitch really understand it too. It's also really great to put like extra setting kind of illustrations if there's something that's like super distinctive. You're like, this is what the evil wizard's lair looks like. I really have a vision for this, so let's include, because it's not going to show up in the test pages, let's include it here. Any opportunity to put more art and put more of this concept stuff in there, it's really great. Like alternate costumes, any type of like research or something like that. Like you really can't overload us with uh drawings like that. And then this is just kind of a bunch of miscellaneous stuff. Um, what I think is really important, especially for something so visual, is to put in a section about the setting description. Obviously, this is most important for things where you're building the world whole cloth, something like sci-fi or fantasy, that you're just like, I've had, again, like one of my clients, we did a big sprawling fantasy book, and we were like, hey, we have to kind of go deep on what the lore of this world is and like how this empire was built. So, we're gonna go ahead and do that, and just like, we just like gave a whole page to that, which, I understand sometimes you're worried about overloading with exposition. You're worried that it might seem like your world building is too heavy, but there is definitely a balance of like, you know, this is all stuff we know we're going to learn slowly, incrementally through reading the book. Like there's a bunch of stuff you can communicate through the images, through how you design it, through the interactions, that we just don't have the time to read because the book's not made yet. It's kind of being like, well, this is just like the unfiltered version, like the the kind of like encyclopedia section about this aspect of my world. But you can also do a setting description for non-fantasy worlds. Like I had a friend of mine who did a pitch that was for it was like a coming of age young adult novel that took place in the Florida Keys, where they grew up. And for them, the Florida Keys were like really, really important, and the setting of it. So they kind of took a bit of space to just talk about how important the setting was for them. So definitely like, really, really show us that you're making intentional choices with everything about this book. And then kind of hand in hand with that, I think it's really great if you have cultural historical context that you're working inside of taking some time to explain that and to walk through that. Um, I've had a historical, something, just to use another example, one of my clients pitched a book that was historical fiction that was really cool. But it was about the Ottoman Empire's colonization of Algeria, which not that many people know about. I didn't know that much about, like my client knew about it, but she was like, yeah, let's make sure that we're not making people have to like go away from the pitch to go and look it up and read up a bunch about it. So we included like a full glossary of terms. We included a full thing about like like this is where the political state was. This is what society was kind of built as at this time, because the story was really relevant about that. So I think especially for historical fiction books, this is really important. But again, it could kind of go anywhere. And then this is last thing of just like important info that's not very flowery, but just like things that the agent and then the editor are going to need to know. We want to know the genre. We want to know your intended demographic, the page count, the actual length, and what kind of format is it going to be in? Is it going to be full colored? Is it going to be limited color? Or is it going to be black and white? And then also, I think what's really important is putting an about the creators for anybody involved in this book. Um, Usually it's a team of one or two. I have seen teams of three before. The, sometimes the lettering is really important, so you guys bring on your own letterer. And I think having all of them spotlighted and all of them with a portrait or a drawing or whatever someone's comfortable with, that's just important also for me as an agent, because like I really want to know like everybody who I'm going to be working with. I've had a few times where I will say writers are usually a lot more guilty of this, where they will do like an about the author and it's just the writer and there's no information about the artist, and I can tell that the artist is not really seen as a collaborator. They're just kind of seen as like a contractor to make the art happen, which is no, it doesn't really bode well for a book I want to work with. So really make sure that you're spotlighting everybody who put effort into this, and that you're showing me as the agent everybody who I'm going to be working with. So that's kind of all the general pieces for the pitch. The Before I get into these tips, kind of what I said earlier, that methodology with how to set it up, I really like doing like biggest picture stuff and then following it with stuff that's like like more granular and more detailed, but also giving us, if it makes sense, it's like you want to give us the information we need to understand the next part. So you give us the log line first, so that way we know, and like the title, maybe like a cover illustration. I also think if you have time and passion to do so, I really think like a snazzy kind of cover illustration on the front can usually catch some eyes. Um, and you want to have the most overreaching, like broad kind of descriptions of things. And then you want to get like from that short kind of synopsis into, maybe after that you do the characters. So that way we know who the characters are before we read the outline. We know what it looks like before we hear about like all of the, cultural details and all of that. And then I think like having the test pages at the very end is really great, because you can kind of like be like, okay, now you have all of that information. Let's synthesize it all together. And here's what the book's actually going to look like. And that's just like also kind of a great, that's just being a little bit, again, like I said, you want to be a salesperson. You want to build up to the most impressive part of your pitch, which should be the actual pages. Um, So these are just kind of some final tips. A lot of this is stuff I've already hopefully said, but like I really, really want to kind of push home for anybody who's coming into this not sure where to go. Uh really become the expert, and by become the expert I mean like know comics inside and out, especially if you're not the person who's going to be ultimately drawing this. You want to be the knowledge base. Like you want to have confidence in everything you're doing, because sometimes you're not going to be working with people who know comics as well as you. So like that's something that I always try to do, is that I, as the agent, like especially with working with different editors that might have varying levels of experience in the genre, I want to make sure that we always have someone in the room who knows what they're talking about. And you know, as the writer, that's partly your responsibility as well. Or just as like the original creator. Use the format to its best potential. There's a reason you're doing a graphic novel and not doing something that's like comparatively a lot easier and a lot more streamlined. Like you picked a graphic novel for for a reason. Really, really push it to, you know, look at other books that have used that you think like, wow, that could only be a comic. It's so incredible how it used its format, and then try to make something like that. When I say keep the simple parts simple, I mean like stuff like structure, stuff like you know, any type of genre breaking things. You're gonna be able to get complicated and interpretive and is abstract about those things, but that's not going to happen always at the original concept stage. You want to start with like a really, really solid structure that then you can build off of and have that support beam system. Like if you're someone who's writing, you really just want to make like as stable of a kind of structure that the artist can then work off of, because that's gonna just cause for like better trust between you guys and not as much like anxiety. You know, if you're trying to balance like a million characters POVs, that might be really hard to do. As we've already established, it's not that long of a story. So you really want to keep uh, you know, make sure that you're minimizing unneeded energy being spent on things that might not be as important to the story. Um, I think it's really important to kind of read and research graphic novels, not just graphic novels, but other genres that are maybe working into them. You know, like know a little bit about manga, know a little bit about like indie comics. Uh, you know, I don't think you need to read too many Cape comics because they're pretty different from what you go for in graphic novels. But if it's a genre that you're finding is speaking to you, then like definitely do some research there. And just like uh the reading part of graphic novels is kind of the easiest one. That's like the easiest job in the whole pipeline. So, you know, take advantage of that and just let yourself become the same as the advice right above it, like let it help you become the expert. You know, there's the creating comics is a lot like dancing, where in order to get this feeling of the original tempo, the kind of like that those parts that you really can't break down in methodology of just like what makes a good comic incredible, you need to just practice to get there. You need to like train your own innate sense to how to get there. And the great news is that you can always, you know, it's free to make a comic. It's completely free. You can literally do one while I'm giving this talk. I used to sometimes when I was like working at retail, I would like challenge myself to make comics on note cards. And it really does make a difference. Even if you don't feel confident in your visual abilities, um, you don't need to show it. Like it can look ugly. Comics are totally allowed to look ugly, but it's going to make other comics that you make later way better. And then the final piece of advice is something that I give to honestly almost every creator, but especially for graphic novels because it's such a big commitment and you really don't know what kind of direction it's going to go in. Um, don't try to change yourself to be more commercial, because you don't quite know what's commercial. Consistently, the thing that readers connect to most is the best story, and the best story is something that someone makes from the heart. It's because they genuinely wanted to make this story. I don't think it's a coincidence that if you look at most of the books that have become bestsellers in the graphic novel space, they all come from web comics. I'm not saying a web comic is the key, but when you think about like a web comic is something that someone makes with absolutely no structure around it, completely independently. You know, not a lot of people know this. Smile by Raina Telgemeier was originally a web comic. It was made for an online blog. And that, self-motivation communicated itself to the readers. So don't try to kind of refit yourself into something that you think that you're like reading on agents and editors' manuscript wish lists, but instead like really have faith in your own passion for the story. Yeah, and that's kind of the last thing I wanted to leave on. I'm totally open now to talk over questions and go over this. Hopefully, there's going to be enough time to talk over this. But yeah, I hope that this was really helpful for everybody attending today.
Yes, this was fascinating. I learned all of it because I didn't know any of it. Thank you, Paloma. So first, for the writers who can't draw a circle
Mhm.
and want to connect with an illustrator, are they just finding them online, finding an artist whose style they like? And what would you recommend for that approach? Like how much, what's the ask? What information do they need to give to an illustrator to get them
Yeah.
interested?
Yeah, so honestly, like you can be kind of a creeper online. Like that's why people put up their work online. It's because they want people to pay attention and to look at it and connect with it. I would say like really look at people whose art you connect to, who's beyond just, oh, they make art that's like a certain level of good that I really like. But also someone that you really feel like, man, like I really feel like they would do a great job of drawing this story that I have in mind. And also seeing that like if they have a passion for it. Social media can now, ever since the total like destruction of one of the best ways to find artists, which was Twitter. And because now a lot of people are really paranoid about AI scraping, for good reason. Sometimes also it's really great to get involved into local events. Almost every town has a local comic show. Uh, Sometimes like it's pretty like I know that there's a lot of towns and cities that have like much smaller comic shows that are, every 3 months, or even, once a month or twice a month. Um, Sometimes comic book shops are the area that people collect for that. Just kind of see where in your community there is that kind of collection of people, because the people that are going there, obviously, especially if they're like tabling and if they're like selling, that means that they're like invested in their career. They want to move forward. They want to have this kind of like jump into the professional world. So it's a great way to find other ambitious people that you can also like talk to in real life. Like I think that's a really, really important thing because you do want to make sure that it's someone that you guys get along and that you also feel like you can communicate really well.
Someone just pointed out, in children's picture books, there's not an expectation that you bring your own illustrator. It's kind of the
Yes.
opposite, right?
Yeah,
Um,
it's completely opposite. In children's books, they don't want to hear your opinion on the art. It's a little bit of like I think it's a little bit like a taboo a bit sometimes. While I, even as an agent, like even before it gets to the editor, not everybody has this opinion, but I want to see what a book is going to look like before I decide to move forward with it.
so if you want to pitch to a publisher, an agent without an illustrator, I mean, is it just that you kind of have to be a big name? Like Jason Reynolds can just say, I have an idea for a graphic novel and they hook him up. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly, because it's something where it's like I know that there are people that represent just writers. Like I have it on my manuscript wish list that I want like I don't, at least I'm pretty sure I do, that it's I prefer the entire creative team to be part of the book before it's pitched to me. But there's definitely a lot of other agents that are okay with someone who's coming in as just a writer. I will say, makes it a lot more competitive. Like it immediately, it's a way more saturated field. And it just makes it way harder to assess the book itself. You know, I think that the thing about graphic novels is that they are entirely defined by what they look like. So for me, I can't imagine taking on just a writer unless it is someone who like I either really really believe in their concepts and like maybe even like we've worked together before. But kind of like even then I'll casually be like, "Hey, honestly, like this will be a lot straighter shot if you can if you can find the artist, or sometimes even come up with like examples of artists that you want to work with, because that's kind of like what we still need to know is like there's so many different ways a graphic novel can look with the exact same story pitch. So you need to kind of like illuminate us.
Just jumping off of that really quickly, something to note too, for any authors who are looking to write their own pitches without attaching an illustrator, is that on the publishing side, not all graphic novel imprints on the traditional publishing side will accept writer-only graphic novel proposals. So you are already like limiting the field in advance for yourself.
Some people asked about word counts, which I suppose varies. Is there an estimate for that?
Yeah, so you can't really assess a graphic novel by word count because a lot of stuff can happen that's not words. Honestly, the word count, like you want to kind of go as low as possible without giving an actual number on it, because a thing to like I kind of said earlier with like a tell for scripts that maybe are not great for a graphic novel is if it's really easy to have too much, like too many words, uh, uh, too many dialogue balloons. If you look at a page of comics and it's mostly balloons with long paragraphs of dialogue in them, it's kind of another question of like, why are you making a comic? Like, you should be telling us this through as little words as possible. Um, I'm also, this is not a hard line. It's totally okay to have this. But I think if you ever are writing a script and you have something where a narration voice comes in of being like, so and so is wondering, blah, 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 blah. I always think I'm like, you should look at that and be like, how can I tell that through comics? Like, I should not have a narration balloon because that's the writer just coming in and like, if anything, sometimes it feels almost micromanaging, where I'll see that in comics sometimes where I'm like, the artist can just tell us, like, I can get this. So you want to have that confidence in the art and what the art can do on its own.
Um, so some of this was specific to like the character development elements. Is there anything particular to know about nonfiction graphic novels? Because someone else pointed out it's not really a genre; it's a format, and it
Yeah,
can be
totally.
anything, right?
Yeah, totally. I think that nonfiction graphic novels are a huge, huge genre. I think especially for older readers, it's like I think it's sneakily like one of the best-selling areas of comics is like older nonfiction stuff. I would say really get someone who is very great at likenesses. If it's someone who, if you're telling like a historical story or a memoir or anything like that, make sure to look at books like that. Like obviously the one that's best to kind of look at is something like March, where that is a hugely massive story that's in a really, really entrenched, like kind of historical context, but you also need to have spaces for the art to do what it does. I think there's also similar questions to adaptation. So if something already exists in a book or as a story and you want to do it as a graphic novel, one, usually that choice kind of comes from the editor side, because if that book is, unless you can like communicate directly to the author and their agent, it's kind of like, it's more going to be that the editor is going to be looking for someone to do an adaptation for them than you pitching a proposed adaptation of something. Um, but there is like a whole other kind of there's a whole other kind of set of skills that comes with adaptation, in the same way, there's a whole set of skills that comes with like translation or something like that. Like you really uh it comes with experience, but you kind of start to catch on to a lot of those nuances.
Uh, Tamara, thank you for answering a lot of questions in the chat. If you typed in a question in the Q&A, be sure to check because we've written some answers out to some specific questions, including about script writing, script format. I take it that it's not super defined.
Yeah, there's a really great template for script formatting that a few comic professionals came out with a while ago. It's great. You can even like download it as a Google Doc or as a Scrivener.
I
Uh,
shared it in the Q&A, by the way.
Oh,
So yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great resource to have if you just want to like start from something. I will say there's a lot of flexibility with scripts, and a lot of it comes down to what your artist needs, not to what I need as the agent or what your editor, like that's a conversation to later have with your editor of how will you format the script for them. But I think actually like, I know some people that when they work with someone as an artist, they don't want it to be super detailed. They don't want it to go like this panel happens and this panel happens, because like, no offense, but sometimes the writer doesn't know the best format for it to go. Sometimes the best thing is to say like, this is what happens in this page, and you can kind of lean on them. Um there's like a time when I, again, like kind of an example from my personal life, where I was writing for a friend's art style, and there was like a section that was like a travel montage, and it was like this gorgeous landscape that I had like pulled all these reference pictures from, and it was like these girls on horseback. And I literally just said, like, for these 2 pages, I just said they just need to get from here to here, and it needs to get more treacherous as it goes. You go for it. And I didn't give any other feedback. And that was great for my artists, because they're like, I can just focus on making this gorgeous and setting it up in the way I want it to set up. So that was like, there's times when you might fluctuate on how much detail you're giving someone.
Let's talk a bit about money stuff. So the author should compensate the artist for drafting things for the pitch, right? And then
Yeah.
it sounds like a lot of work. I assume it's a lot more work for the artist in the editorial process because they're redoing things as they go. So you said
Yeah.
it's not 50-50
Yeah.
on royalties, you mean?
On sometimes royalties, usually it's okay to stay 50-50. But it's usually the advance payment.
Yeah.
Because I've found what it honestly comes down to. Again, this is all stuff that can fluctuate. This can be like conversations that you're all having, but for any writers out there to be really aware of is that if you're working full time on a graphic novel, you cannot also have a job. A writer who's writing a graphic novel can probably also have a day job. So like they need that extra advance to like survive. They need it to like pay, or maybe it could be even something where like the first few the advance payments that are for art, like the lion's share of it goes to this person, so that way it's like they'll have this money that they can use to live while they're working on the book itself. And really there, it's just like honest communication. It's being very like understanding of everybody's situation and making sure that like, the book will happen.
Also jumping in here to say that this is something to discuss with your agent, but it is always a good idea to have a collaboration agreement in place and to have those splits and those money decisions figured out in advance.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also something that you want to look for in a collaborator is someone that you'll feel comfortable uh communicating really honestly about that. And that someone's not going, if you're worried like, well, I don't want to give them more because I'm worried that they might like cheat me out of it. It's like if you're having that suspicion, it should not be someone that you're working with.
Makes sense. A lot of people are curious about film rights. We always get questions about TV and film rights, but it's easy to imagine a graphic novel being adapted.
Yeah.
Is the IP 50/50, or is there anything
I think
unusual
IP and
compared to other
royalties.
books on subrights?
Yeah, IP and royalties are totally fine to go 50-50 on because that's more about the concept. And at that point, it's also like, both of you guys created the final book. Um, I think that with film rights, the main thing is just making sure that even if the what you'll see a lot of times in contracts is that they'll say if the visuals are being directly adapted, then we'll pay like film rights to the artist, and if not, it will just go to the writer. I think that that's pretty, I usually don't accept that because in my eyes, even if like not a single drawing goes from the original book to the adaptation, if it's like a live action adaptation, I still think like so much of the tone of the acting, of the character definition, of the pacing of the book does come down to the writing on the artist's side. So I think like for all of those decisions, you should just both be like we're the same amount, we're equal collaborators in what ended up being the final like impression of the book.
That makes sense. Um, well, we can wrap it up, but a few people asked about, platform, crowdfunding. You spoke about web comics being a good idea. Um, is there any, I mean, is it just good to show like a proof of concept and have some fans? Is a platform for the author or illustrator super important?
Yes and no. Webcomics, to be clear, I don't know if webcomics are a good idea for everyone. I've had like I think I've mentioned this a few times, like I come from an art background. I've had a lot of friends who have done webcomics, and most of them have abandoned them. Like I have like two friends that finished their webcomic, and it's also something that can be like a really long commitment, a lot of work. Um, I think it's totally fine to start a project like that and then end up not going through with it. But if you end up having that type of platform and those types of fans, at a certain point, it'll definitely be helpful. If you have, for example, something like Check Please was able to really just explode due to its fan a kind of attention, and that really then I'm sure helped with the decision to and really helped with kind of selling it at the end. But also like keep in mind it's a really long kind of plateau before you get to that kind of level, and you shouldn't be prioritizing it. If it ends up happening, it's great. Also sometimes for artists, it's really great because that means that or even writers as well, but like that means that you can have that kind of like passive income that would come from something like a Patreon or a web comic, while you're also working on a book. But webcomics are not quite the perfect thing to pitch to agents or editors, just because they can usually be structurally a lot looser. They have way more pages. Um, they're way more organically built because you're kind of a lot of, even if you plan ahead, you are still drawing it like week by week. So just formatting wise, it can be a little bit round peg and square hole. Um, Doesn't mean that it should be eliminated, and definitely webcomics can and have been sold, like I said earlier, as incredibly successful books. But don't like prioritize that path. More just think of like, okay, what is the thing that I am most equipped to do? If you are someone who really feels confident in social media and in self-marketing and even something like crowdfunding, that's totally a fine thing to do. It's not going to eliminate your chances. Like if something is a crowdfunded book, I think it's still completely fine to pitch it to editors and to agents. Like I have not seen I ask editors this question a lot of times of, if something is a webcomic, will it eliminate the chance to pitch it to you? And they all of them say no. They say no, go ahead and pitch it to us. We're just gonna assess it based on the actual pitch and like what we think it'll like whether or not we think it'll be a good fit for us.